Thank you for having me, Yvonne. It is rather dire. Evergrande is symbolic of a deeper challenge for China's corporate bad debt. To put it in perspective, at the end of 2020, private non-financial sector debt in China was roughly 222% of GDP. For the United States, it's 146%, so it's quite large. Evergrande is set to miss interest payments on bank loans due next week. And so we are actually looking at probably one of the most significant debt restructurings of all time just around the corner. Evergrande got into this situation slowly. It's ran up large debts over the last decade as it expanded in China's volatile real estate market. It's have built as many as 600,000 homes annually. It's also strayed very far from its core businesses, opening a colossal football academy, starting a water bottle company that it later sold, and an electric vehicle company. Its debt load now, some $300 billion US dollars, is 56 times larger than it was a decade ago. As you note, it's perhaps on the brink of collapse, but we've kind of seen this story before. The government in China has been, thanks to its kind of expansive growth and the toolkits it's used in the past, has stepped in previously to prevent debt leaking into the banking system. That's one of the issues here. There's concerns about liquidity pressures and pressures on the real estate and banking markets within China.
Well, just how much of an impact would a default by Evergrande have on the housing market and in turn China's economy, and how likely is it that the government might step in and intervene?
We think it's very likely that the government will intervene. What that will look like is not that certain. Perhaps it will be the government serving as a kind of a broker and authorizing state-owned enterprises to come in and kind of rescue Evergrande at this time. However, Evergrande is part of a larger ecosystem. It has projects in some 230 different cities in China, which involve lots of different suppliers. And then, of course, one of the issues that you're seeing with the protests you alluded to is that there are a lot of home buyers, key components of China's rising urban middle class, which are crucial to government support, who are very upset because the way a lot of these investors became involved with Evergrande is they pay for properties up front before they've been constructed. So they've already paid for homes that they're not yet living in and that now might not be completed were Evergrande to collapse. So what I think we'll see is not an absolute collapse, but a government's effort to have kind of a controlled unspooling to avoid, as you alluded to, a Lehman Brothers movement, where we've been teetering to avoid an absolute catastrophe.
And of course, given how big the company is, so we're bound to see ripple effects even abroad.
Yes, I think that's an important point. There's been increasing exposure to Chinese debt from global investors. Actually, some $21 billion of that debt is held in foreign currency debts, largely by foreign creditors. So while the majority of Evergrande's creditors are its suppliers and home buyers and kind of smaller creditors, there is a significant amount that is exposed to the global economy.
And even if the Chinese government comes to Evergrande's aid, it won't be the end of the company's woes, will it?
It certainly will not. This, again, as I mentioned earlier, alludes to one of the big structural challenges remaining for China's economy, and actually key to resolve if it's going to continue its development growth. Addressing the really seeming interminable amount of bad corporate debt in the economy is something that China has been trying to do for many years. But this government is, of course, very concerned with stability, both social and financial. And that is kind of what you're seeing with the Evergrande situation.
So what's being discussed behind the scenes, and how do you think this will pan out in the coming days?
I think, the issue at the moment is how the financial advisors that the company has brought on board will help it to navigate through this process. You've seen in the past that rather than letting a collapse or a complete default, there'll be some conglomeration of speaking with regulators, coming up with contingency plans, deciding, which pieces might be allowed to default or fail. I think this might be the tip of the iceberg for property sector defaults in China. China's had a very effervescent, but perhaps overheated property market. It's a key part of China's economy, accounting for nearly 28% of the economy. So there are larger implications. How exactly they'll play out is still uncertain. But because of the connectivity and to the global economy, of course, it's not just people within China who are watching. It's people far beyond as well.
And as you mentioned before, this is not the only company that has kind of had this situation. Can we look at previous instances to kind of see what might happen in the future?
I think it's difficult to look at instances with other companies because, as you noted, Evergrande, its name is very appropriate, is so much grander and larger than any other of the companies. But in the past, the government has found ways to prevent a complete collapse from Evergrande. And that's why, if history is any guide, we suspect that will be the case. You know, the government has indicated that it wants a transparent and a more disciplined, transparent process for addressing this type of a situation, and actually for a way to allow these companies that are deeply indebted to default without collapsing or deeply stressing the financial system. Those statements have been made, but there's no real clear path about how to do that. And I think in the Evergrande case in particular, because you have so many home buyers who are implicated and for whom their life savings have been caught up, or a significant portion of their life savings have been caught up with this company, this potential threats versus instability is too great to allow a full collapse.
Mattie Bekink, thank you so much for joining The World tonight.
Thank you for having me.